there for Whitman Walker, and we were honored to be there in return for Jerry and his family by offering legal guidance in navigating the labyrinth of critical end-of-life medical care. Thanks to Jerry's generosity, the Whitman Walker family has touched thousands of individuals and continues to provide access to health care and support services, including legal services, to those who are most vulnerable among us. With Jerry's gentle power in mind, Whitman Walker commits to carrying on the spirit and legacy of his work by rededicating ourselves to social justice and by serving our community. Thank you very much.
Good evening. I'm here on behalf of the National LGBTQ Task Force. Jerry served on the board of the then National Gay and Lesbian Task Force for 13 years, which included 4 terms as co-chair of the board, which is amazing. And I don't want to be repetitive about the myriad of programs that Jerry worked on, but I feel I would be remiss if I didn't say that Jerry understood the breadth of the LGBTQ struggle for freedom and was really clear and uncompromising in his commitment that that vision included transgender people. Personally, I will deeply miss Jerry, who was my friend. He was like an uncle to me. I met him when I began working at the task force in 1998. Jerry took me under his wing, and we spent many a Thursday night on Kalorama Road folding letters together. Jerry was never afraid to roll up his sleeves and do the hard work that needed to be done. Jerry was a progressive with an unwavering vision of equality for all people. He will be remembered for his leadership, but most importantly for his kindness and compassion. Surely the world is a better place having had his talents, and we are beholden to all that Jerry has contributed to the movement. And someday, when DC does achieve statehood, I know that glasses around the city will be raised to include a toast in his honor of his dedication to get us there. Jerry, at the end of the day, was a grassroots activist through and through. It's my honor tonight to announce that the National LGBTQ Task Force has started a Jerry Clark Activist Intern Fund. And this is in reverence to Jerry's life work, and I can't think of anything that would make him happier. Thank you.
First of all, I'm honored. One of the things I learned about Jerry, in fact, I met him through a brother by the name of Keith Silvers at the Dr. Martin Luther King Peace Walk and Parade Committee. And I learned about Jerry. Jerry didn't care if you were straight, crooked, gay, transgender, whatever. He recognized the goodness and the greatness of humanity. And Jerry had a passion and a love for humanity. And he said very little, but when he said something, you had to listen because it was significant. He had a passion for the population that I represent. Returning citizens, we say we're human also. And I'd like to just leave you with this. That if you want to carry on a legacy like Jerry, do everything you possibly can to make God's creation better than you found it. That's the significance of a Jerry. We have to get around labels, titles, and we have to look at the best in each and every one of us. And each and every one of us have to become involved in the community at large. The gentleman that just spoke talked about gun violence. No one is safe in our community as long as guns are available. And we have to remember that. So whatever your passion is, whatever you want to be committed to, get involved in making a difference in our community and leaving God's creation better than you found it. Thank you.
Good evening. It's so good to see so many friends here tonight. David Meadows, I'm reading a statement on behalf of at-large Councilmember Anita Bonds. I extend my sincerest sympathy upon learning of the passing of my friend of many years, Mr. Jerry Clark, a veteran LGBT and statehood activist known for his leadership, his kindness, and compassion. Jerry's work helped people open their minds to a vision of equality for all people. Although Jerry was raised in Muncie, Indiana, his home was the District of Columbia. Throughout the years, Clark served on the Democratic National Committee's Gay and Lesbian Leadership Council and with distinction as co-chair of the National Gay and Lesbian Task Force Board of Directors. Locally, Jerry remained a constant fixture in the political fabric of D.C., where he fought for justice and equality for all people. He was one of the lead organizers of the LGBT contingent in the city's annual MLK parade and served as chair of the DC Statehood Coalition. Among his many involvements, he was a trustee for the Law and Society Association, the political director of DC for Democracy, a long-serving member of both the Gertrude Stein Democratic Club and the DC Coalition, as well as a board member of Stop Gun Violence. As we celebrate his life and his many accomplishments that have left an indelible impact upon us all, let's keep Jerry, his friends, his family, and his associates in our prayers as they grieve this great loss. And I hope they're comforted, knowing they have friends beside them in this time of sorrow. Precious in the sight of the Lord is the death of his saints. Anita Bonds, council member. And so, thank you. While I do have the mic, I have to share a personal anecdote, an experience that I won't forget. That was about 1997. I was working on the Hill, and I was headed up to Jerry's house for a fundraiser. And standing next to me was Maxine Waters, and I said, "Congresswoman Waters, how are you?" "Well, I've got to go. I'm headed to this fundraiser." And I said, "Well, I'm headed that way too." And I actually caught a ride with the congresswoman. So Maxine Waters and I, we had a 15-minute conversation about how much she loved Jerry Clark and how she loved NGLTF. And I think at that time it was gays in the military still, and it was domestic partnerships. Marriage equality really wasn't on the forefront, but she really admired Jerry Clark, and it just shows you that even though we know him as our local hero, he was a hero for many across the nation, and I respect that and I miss him. And that's that. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Eleanor Hart, a member of the DC Statehood Coalition, and I'd like to thank Chuck and Ladd for this incredible event. It was a little over a year ago that Jerry really started to pull the coalition together so that we could take a trip to Charlotte, North Carolina for the Democratic National Convention and lobby for statehood. And that was our first venture, and Jerry thought we did it well enough that we should keep the coalition together, and so we did keep it together ever since. Jerry was terribly committed to statehood, but he was also very realistic. He knew that it would take a lot of work, and he was willing to do the work, and it made, I think, us willing to join him in doing the work. The other thing he cared so much about was working for statehood in a united way. And we were a little bit fragmented, and it sometimes still are a little fragmented, but in our memory of Jerry, we should know how much he wanted us to work together. On behalf of the Statehood Coalition, thank everybody for this, and thank Jerry.
Let's give all our organizations a round of applause. And back again to entertain us is Mr. Roy Hill.
Let's give Mr. Hill another round of applause. At this time, we'll move into tributes and reflections by friends and the community. If Ms. Carol Schwartz can come forward, Johnny Barnes, Mary Eva Condone, Frank Smith, and Jeffrey Salvin.
Jerry was a great guy, really a great guy. And he was so handsome with those sparkling blue eyes and that perfect smile and that voice and that fabulous cleft chin. I actually had a crush on him and was very sorry that he was gay. Kind of the story of my life. But now back to Jerry. Whatever the cause to better DC and the lives of his people, Jerry was there. True democracy for our city, LGBTQ issues, he was there. Trying to stop gun violence, he was there. I first met Jerry in the 80s, when we were both working for Whitman Walker Clinic in a volunteer capacity. And we became fast friends. And then in the 90s, we became neighbors in Ward 1. He even helped in some of my campaigns, but don't tell anybody. He was there as well. I'm sad that he won't be there. But let's just keep him here. God bless you.
Hello, I'm Mary Eva Camden, the DC Democratic National Committee woman, but I'm also a native, and I was a lucky person to meet and get to know Jerry Clark in 1973 when he, as was told before, moved into Precinct 13 of Ward 1. And I too came back from college and moved into Precinct 13 and have never left. Jerry actually left us to go over to Precinct 25, but that's okay. I think he went to Precinct 25 because it was more diverse than my west of Connecticut Precinct 13. But Jerry N. Clark, a Renaissance man. I met him after we moved into Precinct 13, registering voters for the home rule effort that we hoped district citizens would pass in 1974. We then became the precinct captains, Democratic Party captains of Precinct 13, and we worked the polls for Jimmy Carter all day in that general election, and we're so thrilled at the end of the day that we actually got a Democrat elected. And we decided we would celebrate. Well, in 1976, Larry Brown, the great Redskin, who had, I think, just retired, he opened a nightclub at the corner of 20th and R. Well, that was just across the street from Precinct 13. So Jerry and I went over and we spent the night there celebrating the Jimmy Carter presidential election. And I, like Carol, Jerry hadn't come out in 1976. And he was a single man in my precinct who seemed to have a good job, But more than that, he was just a great companion. So we went from doing the Democratic Party work in Precinct 13. He had, from that time, shortly thereafter, my family and I suffered a major trauma, a death that should not have happened. And Jerry, who knew me only politically, out there in the community, he came to be with me and my family because he was larger than himself. He recognized pain that he wanted to help with, even when he, as we know, struggling for one's identity is enormously painful. But he was able to reach out and help a family in crisis. We continued to be close friends, and he of course did a lot of work with LGTB, and during this time in the late 70s, he encouraged me, and I trusted his judgment enormously, to become the first executive director of the DC Democratic Party after we had reorganized, the city reorganized the committee after the home rule effort. And so he said, Mary Eva, perfect for you. Go over there, you know. So, you know, he was someone you could rely on in tough times and look to for advice in the good times. But the Renaissance guy, I want to point out, frequently and often, anytime I went to the Kennedy Center for the ballet, which I did as often as I could, there was Jerry Clark, thoroughly enjoying the ballet. Nothing about, you know, social justice or Democratic Party politics. He recognized the beauty in human movement and artistry. And we enjoyed our times together when we went there. Then one of the the many special times was in 2008. He, as has been mentioned, was elected Obama delegate, and I happened to be a super delegate, don't hit me, for Hillary. But of course, when Hillary gave all the votes to Obama, I, of course, was for Obama. But we sat there in the open air in the Denver Stadium, Jerry and I together, watching the Obama family come out, watching Obama take the nomination. I mean, it was one of the more moving experiences to be able to share, and they're going to try to shut me up, to share with Jerry. And I'm moving on. I just want you to know, because it's a Renaissance man, not just a political person, not just a social justice advocate, but a lover of beauty. The last time I was with Jerry, we were actually dancing together at a fundraiser for some type of social justice issue, but still, dancing. This guy could be serious, but he loved humanity, loved the artistry of our life, and like our contemporaries said, when I think of Jerry, I thought he would always be here. Like James Taylor said, I always thought, Jerry, I'd see you again. So stay with us, right, Jerry? Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. This is a letter to Jerry. Dear Jerry, thank you for befriending me almost 40 years ago when I was a young single gay patronizing the historic happy hour at the legendary Rascals Bar in DuPont Circle, and you were the extremely handsome and sophisticated older man I was so excited to meet. Thank you for the attention you gave me that night and night after night when I chased you around, never revealing to me that you were interested in another Flava. Thank you for eventually taking me under your wing and inviting me into your A-list social orbit, and especially for the numerous invitations to all those wonderful parties at your house where there was always a sea of incredible-looking, well-dressed black men, virtually everyone of great accomplishment. Thank you for then converting our bar friendship into a relationship where you became the older brother I never had, and a role model so different from the ones of my upbringing in the 50s and 60s, so different from the lispy hairdressers and the flamboyant florists, who while they had value, were unfortunately the only ones available before the great movement began at Stonewall in 1969 and gay people like you came along. Thank you for being the first gay I knew who had a salary over $100,000 a year. And the first one with such a highly regarded job and position of great power like you had at the United Mine Workers Retirement Fund. Thank you for getting involved with the National Gay and Lesbian Task Force after I co-hosted the wonderful Honoring Our Allies event during the 1993 March as a member of the host committee that I had recruited, and never realizing that this would lead you to a position of such importance at the task force. Thank you for the great impact you had on the success of the task force, especially as board chair when I was your devoted board ally and you helped rescue the organization from extinction. Thank you for being one of my closest day-to-day personal confidants, taking my calls in the wee hours of the night, giving me advice, information, and support on everything that was going on in my life, whether in my career, with my family, on the political front, in the movement, and especially in my bedroom. Thank you for being a regular at the hundreds of Super Bowls, birthday parties, fundraisers, friend-raisers, political rallies, and the like. I could always count on you to show up, have the best manners in the room, have the ability to talk to everyone in the room, and help celebrate the multitude of friends and causes we shared in common. Jerry, as a tribute to you, I pledge to continue to keep your memory alive, call your name whenever necessary, and quote your wisdom over and over. We will somehow carry on the struggle without you, but it will never be the same. Stay woke.
Randy Carter from Durham, North Carolina. When I got up this morning to drive in the rain, I had on my mind that quote, "Stayed on freedom." I want to really send some greetings on behalf of the National Black Justice Coalition because we have a very personal relationship with Chuck and Jerry. In 2013, which was the 50th anniversary of the 63 March on Washington, it was amazing, August 28th, a Wednesday, 50 years to the day, that our first ever African-American president stood in the exact same spot where that speech was given. And thanks to Chuck and Jerry, we also talked about Bayard Rustin and James Baldwin, oftentimes forgotten because of who they were. So I bring you greetings on behalf of Sharon Letman Hicks, our executive director, our staff, our board, and our members, and remembering Jerry. And to Jerry's family, thank you for sharing the gift of Jerry Clark. And what I love is when I'm looking at this particular picture, I like what's on the front because that's the smile that I'll always remember of Jerry. We're in a moment. One of the things you talked about was DC statehood. I'm coming from the state of North Carolina. Drama happens, but oftentimes it's almost like to say this. It's not a question of if, it's a question of when. And when you get all that rustling and all that noise out there, they're just pretty much telling you, yeah, you're just about right around the corner to getting what you want. So hang in. Support you 100%. Thank you so much, and thank you, Jerry.
Good evening. I'm Rick Rosendahl. The tribute that we paid to Jerry 2 years ago with our Distinguished Service Award has already been mentioned, and we honored him last month with a tribute at our anniversary reception. One of the great speeches in our nation's history was already referenced earlier. It included these lines right before the most famous lines. All we say to America is be true to what you said on paper. Now those words by a charismatic 39-year-old preacher spoken on the 3rd of April, 1968, the day before he was murdered, are a good motto for all of the people in this room. We are part of a multi-generational struggle, rooted in the belief that embracing our diversity is ultimately more powerful than fearing it. The tools of that struggle are old-fashioned habits of perseverance and cooperation. No one epitomized those values better than my friend Jerry. This is a year in particular when his presence among us would have been greatly appreciated because of his grace and good humor. Trust is something that can only really exist if truly given. Jerry won trust and affection across all the spectrum of our wonderful city, and his counsel and his friendship will certainly be missed by many, many people in the very difficult months that we face ahead, but we will get through them because we have had people like Jerry with us. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I was at a memorial service for a friend just this weekend, and this is a person I knew for a long time. But when I went to the memorial service, everybody was telling their stories, different aspects of this wonderful, wonderful guy. And I felt really sad because I only knew very little of him. Although I knew him a long time, I knew very little compared to all these stories his friends were telling me. I'm very fortunate because everyone's story here, I can remember, almost everyone. I've known Jerry for a very long time. I've known him since I got to DC in like 93. So I met him shortly after I got here. And I rented a room from him, and he was a very good friend. And after I left, we stayed in contact. I mean, we were close. During the time we separated, but we were always very close. Jerry called a lot, and he always wanted something, always wanted me to volunteer or contribute or do something, and I was happy to do so. Sometimes reluctantly, but happy to do it. Because I knew whatever Jerry called, it was for a good cause. Jerry was never selfish. I was supposed to share a story that when I rented a room from Jerry, I rented a top room. He said, and I don't know how many of you ever visited Jerry's home, but at the top room I rented, the room overlooks Rock Creek Park, and there's a rooftop deck out there. He said he's going to build a deck out there. And I said, oh, wow, this is going to be a great room. I mean, I'm new from D.C. I'm from Alabama, so this was all exciting to me. You know what? That roof is still there. There's no deck out there. And I understand why. Jerry was so busy with every one of you that he never had time to build that roof. So, in closing, I just want to say that I'm very privileged. I'm very happy, more so to Jerry's family, because a lot of times we lose people and we never get to say goodbye. I got to say goodbye to Jerry. And that was so much, and thank you so much for that.
At this time, we'll have a selection by Mr. Sterling Washington.
This is a number that Jerry sang at many of the MLK Peace Walks that he helped organize in the city. So, we shall overcome. We shall overcome.
going to hear from family, and to a great degree, Jerry was like my brother, my best friend, and we just talked every day, and I can remember so much about Jerry, but Jerry was, first of all, effective. He cared about people. He was a good man. There's something about in the Bible that says Job was a good man, but Jerry was a good man. I want to bring on, if Anise will come up and Reverend Wiley, while we make the last comment. Jerry's family was absolutely incredible during his illness. His sister, his niece Amy, his niece Erin, and her partner Amy, they were there continuously, along with a huge, good circle of friends that just never not were there. And Jerry said to me one day, he said, Chuck, I'm so amazed at the amount of people support I have. I said, Jerry, why is that? He said, I just never expected that. But Jerry was such a good person, and people we asked, and we didn't ask everybody. We could have had everybody that we could have asked for people if they would have been in that circle. But you know Jerry, he was an independent person. And so we tried to keep that independence for him. But let me bring up and let her make some remarks, and that is Amy. Jerry was almost like Jerry's niece also. So Amy said, please.
Thank you very much. This is all very overwhelming, and I didn't know I was going to speak, so there goes. On behalf of Jerry's family, he has 4 surviving siblings. They live in a lot of different states, and had decided to do a memorial service for Jerry in July when more of them can come out there. They can all make it out there at that point, and a lot of the nieces and nephews. And I hope very much that many of you will be able to come, because I know they would love to hear some of your reminiscences themselves. We planned it in July because Jerry's 75th birthday was coming up. Erin, my wife, and I took him out to dinner or brunch or something on last year to 74th, and we were sitting there, and he said, well, this is all well and good, but we really need to talk about next year. And we hadn't really done the math, and so what do you mean? He said, well, it's my 75th. He said, oh, well, maybe we should have some people over and some cake or something at your house. And he said, no, it's not going to be a big enough space. We started throwing out ideas, and finally, and everyone, no, that's not a big enough space. What about that place where you won the award a couple years ago? Mm-mm. I said, how many people do you think are going to come to your 75th birthday party? And I said, well, at least 150, maybe 200, I'm not sure. So we wanted to honor his wish to have a big birthday bash, and that's sort of what the July event will be about, I hope. I'll just say briefly that Jerry, I married Erin just a few years ago, and I've known Jerry for maybe 6-7 years, so nowhere near what anyone here has known him. And we always invited him to holiday dinners, and the kids would have recitals and be in a school musical, and Jerry always showed up. I kind of assumed, I didn't really know that Jerry was a big deal, and I kind of assumed that, oh, Erin's older uncle, he's probably lonely. And I realized he probably canceled events to come to these stupid school plays, but he was always there, and he would sit at our dining room table and play Pictionary with my 7-year-old niece and act like that was exactly where he wanted to be. And I don't think he was acting. I think that's exactly where he wanted to be. And that was his magic, and that was his gift, and that's what I'll remember. So thank you all very much.
Before we do this poem, Anise Jenkins would like to make a few remarks. And also, Franklin Garcia is here. He's going to be After this service, he's going to be interviewing people so you can make comments and remarks while you're at the reception, and we're going to have that available at the birthday party.
I just want to talk briefly about Jerry. As you can see, 3DC, I'm committed to statehood, and I thought that I wouldn't meet anyone who was as committed as I have been over the years and as other people that I have known over the years. But I must say that Jerry, when he got involved, he was all in. He didn't cut any corners, he didn't sacrifice, he didn't do anything that would not promote DC statehood. In fact, as someone was saying, Jerry wanted us all to work together. The DC Statehood Coalition was founded after we were, but we joined. And we joined full stop. Jerry got us to go down to North Carolina to campaign during the Democratic Convention. And our main purpose was to spread the word of DC statehood to all the delegates down there. I do have to say that I went down on Amtrak and met them there. Some people rode, drove, whatever, went on the bus. I discovered something very key about Jerry. Jerry was escorting us back and forth to different locations in North Carolina. I found out that Jerry couldn't drive. Riding with Jerry was like going on the roller coaster. Sometimes we were going across the divisions on the highway. So I'm just going to admit I was so glad that I went with him, that he talked me into going, but I came back on Amtrak. We loved him. If, by Rudyard Kipling. If you can keep your head when all about you are losing theirs and blaming it on you. If you can trust yourself when all men doubt you, but make allowance for their doubting too. If you can wait and not be tired by waiting, or being lied about, don't deal in lies, or being hated, don't give way to hating, and yet don't look too good nor talk too wise.
If you can dream and not make dreams your master, if you can think and not make thoughts your aim, if you can meet with triumph and disaster and treat those two impostors just the same, if you can bear to hear the truth you've spoken, twisted my knives to make a trap for fools, or watch the things you gave your life to broken and stoop down and build them up with 101 tools.
If you can make one heap of all your winnings and risk it on one turn of pitch and toss and lose and start again at your beginnings and never breathe a word about your loss. If you can force your heart and nerve and sinew to serve your turn long after they are gone. And so hold on when there is nothing in you except the will which says to them, hold on.
If you can talk with crowds and keep your virtue, or walk with kings, nor lose the common touch, if neither foes nor loving friends can hurt you, if all men count with you, but none too much, if you can fill the unforgiving minute with 60 seconds worth of distant run. Yours is the earth and everything that's in it, and, which is more, you'll be a man, my son. Thank you. I'd like to bring on Reverend Wiley. And Reverend Wiley and Jerry were very, very close, and they worked on a lot of projects, and they were involved with the Martin Luther King Parade. But Reverend Wiley and his church were very, very active in marriage equality. And he and Jerry formed a special close bond. and I thought of nobody else to have a word of inspiration than Reverend Riley. So please welcome Reverend Riley.
Thank you, Chuck, for allowing me to be a part of this wonderful memorial tribute to an amazing man. In the current national political climate in which so many words are spoken, but so little is said, in which the winds of change blow, but often seem to produce little more than hot air, in which excessive focus is placed on, quote, me instead of us, I instead of we, in which promises are made only to be broken, in which those who claim to stand for something appear willing to fall for anything, and in which those who would unify us are actually the masters of division, and in which leaders who quietly but effectively exude truth, integrity, principle, character, courage, and grace seem to be a dying breed. It is particularly painful at this moment in history to lose a gentle but fearless giant like Jerry Clark. I cannot remember, as others have said, the first time Jerry and I met. It may have been in the struggle for marriage equality for the District of Columbia, or it could have been during a demonstration for DC statehood, or it could have been at one of the annual Martin Luther King Day parades right in the neighborhood where our church is located. But what I do remember more than anything else is that our common commitment to freedom, justice, and equality for all men, women, boys, and girls, regardless of race, class, gender, ethnicity, sexual orientation, gender identity or expression, religion, nationality, age, ability, or any other superficial distinction, often brought us together as comrades on the same side of controversial issues. It made no difference if the issue involved white or black, gay or straight, male or female, rich or poor, incarcerated or free. The common thread that united us was the unshakable conviction that all human beings are created equal and that indeed all have a right to the pursuit of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. In other words, while we both fought for civil rights, gay rights, voting rights, women's rights, etc., what always mattered most of all to each of us was human rights. And that is why we so often found ourselves in so many of the same places, at the same times, on the same side of the same issues that mattered in the same degree to each of us. In this day and time, the word intersectionality has become a catchword for expressing the interconnectedness of oppression. It points to an understanding that none of us is an island unto ourselves and that each of our individual identities are composed not simply of one element, but of several interrelated components. Thus, if we would sit down at the proverbial table of brotherhood and sisterhood, none of us ought to be compelled to check any component of our identity at the door, just so we can merge and assimilate inconspicuously into some kind of amorphous hodgepodge of humanity. In fact, instead of a melting pot, as America is often called, I prefer, and I think Jerry would too, the analogy of vegetable soup. In other words, just as vegetable soup represents a delicious concoction of different ingredients, still nonetheless
none of its components, for example, the corn, the beans, the peas, the tomatoes, or the carrots, must sacrifice their distinctive flavor, peculiar texture, and particular identity. In fact, it is their unique identities that, when mixed together, make the whole greater than the sum of its parts. Not only that, but the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who evolved from challenging racism to also attacking classism and militarism, taught us that we are all bound together in a mutual garment of destiny, that none of us is free until all of us are free, and that injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. Furthermore, as he continued to connect the dots of oppression, he pointed to the image of the planet Earth as a world house. I quote him, he said, "The large house in which we live demands that we transform this worldwide neighborhood into a worldwide brotherhood," and I would add sisterhood. "Together we must learn to live as brothers and sisters, or together we will be forced to perish as fools." King went on to say this call for a worldwide fellowship that lifts neighborly concern beyond one's tribe, race, class, and nation is in reality a call for an all-embracing and unconditional love for all people. It seems to me that it is this unconditional love that Jerry N. Clark not only understood, but internalized and embodied in such a beautiful, humble, and effective way that all of you have given voice to here this evening. You see, so many people think that spirituality is about a religious label, Christian, Muslim, Jewish, etc. But in the final analysis, it is not about a label, but instead about the unconditional love that is in one's own heart. For instance, according to my faith, God is love, and we who have been created in the image of God love because God first loved us. This is why when asked what is the greatest commandment of all, a young carpenter from Galilee responded that the first is this: love the Lord your God with all your heart and all your mind and all your strength and all your soul. And the second is like unto it: love your neighbor as yourself. It seems to me that the love that flowed from Jerry, not only to me as his brother in the struggle, but to all of humanity, was a divine love that was rooted not in the superficial possessions, titles, and achievements of this world, but in something greater, something deeper, something more everlasting.